had enough rest, or I took time to have all of the cobwebs blown out of my head, I went back to work.
Some common yet powerful words of none other than Frank Sinatra. Who doesn't get tired when they have been working constantly for 300 days in a year, touring all over the world and giving their best at every live performance to keep the audience hooked and maintain the stature which was claimed after facing mountains of difficulties? And sounds like a lot, doesn't it? That's because it is, and you probably don't know the half of it. So apart from being a gem of a composer and musician, Frank Sinatra was so many other things. More often than not, people forget to look at the broad side and actually understand who Frank Sinatra was and what did he do for the country. From rags to riches and obscurity to fame, here is a complete gist of Frank Sinatra. 1. An influence. In life, it is paramount that one determines their value on their own terms and realizes what is it at the same time, so that they don't settle for anything less than they deserve. So why are some things priced at a staggering amount which puts them in a league of their own? It is because of their value and the fact that it's a timeless piece. While only one can hold or purchase it, the others are just left admiring it. Similar is the case with people. The entertainment industry has been gifted with legends like Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Elvis Presley, and Charlie Chaplin, and the list just goes on and on. Despite so many of them being there, they all were able to establish their own identity that set them apart from the rest. The entertainment industry thrived in the early 1900s when acting and music stared at breakthroughs that set the tone for generations to come. And when we talk of the early 1900s, we simply can't mention Frank Sinatra enough. If music has a benchmark, then Frank Sinatra sits on that bench with pride. Don't get us wrong, many fantastic musicians came after him as well who have done some amazing work with their songs, but no one could quite match what Sinatra did. Frank was not just about music. He brought in major changes in the industry that were not there before he stepped in. To change something or someone, you have to start at the root of it, and that is exactly what Frank did throughout his career. Not only did his impact turn the game around for the music industry, he had a major influence on America as a country. Even Bob Dylan said, all those things that we thought were here to stay, they did go away, but he never did. Sinatra was one of the best, and there is no doubt about that. But more than that, he was an influence who touched countless lives and created an unparalleled influence. It is not only us who think this way. Here is what some of the other artists think about Frank Sinatra. Joe Lovano, an American instrumentalist, feels Sinatra's sound. His voice had the same meaning and impact as the great improvisers and tenor saxophone players. He's one of the few cats who spanned all these different generations and always project amazing glow. The late James Moody, an American saxophone player, thought, I did an album of Sinatrues because I like all the songs that he chose. They were profound tunes with substance. They're standards, but they were beautiful standards with a lot of meaning to them, really good compositions. Fast forward to today, and stars like Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, and Beyonce respect Frank Sinatra and consider him an inspiration. They have all done their part to pay him a tribute and honor his legacy, which further solidifies what Sinatra has done for the industry. Lady Gaga came out with an album in collaboration with Tony Bennett titled Cheek to Cheek, in which she performed multiple numbers from the Great American Songbook, which was influenced by none other than Frank Sinatra. Bruno Mars, on the other hand, often incorporates suave, which is a stylish persona of Frank, a superior blend of funk, R&B, and pop. Additionally, Bruno tries to incorporate elements from Frank's stage performance into his own, in an attempt to better engage his audience. And all this doesn't even come close to summing up the amount of respect Frank Sinatra earned throughout his career. Apart from being present at the music front, Frank was rather actively involved in politics as well. Politics is a rather dicey thing to talk about. but we would want to cover what went behind the curtain and how was Frank involved. He rose to fame in the 1940s when his talent and skill were unmatched by any other musician at the time. However, a downfall came in the year 1950, and sometime after when rumors spread of his ties with the mafia at the time. But what is the truth behind all of this? That is what we are here to uncover today. So, let's start with where it all began. 2. Where it all began. At a time when every child had multiple siblings, and it was rather unusual for parents to have a single child, Frank Sinatra was born. It was December 12th, 1915, in Hoboken, New Jersey, where Italian immigrants Antonio Sinatra and Natalina Garaventa gave birth to Francis Albert Sinatra. Frank did not have a very strong start, to say the least. One of the biggest mishaps he encountered was directly after he was born. It was in an apartment's kitchen where Frank was delivered. But the moment he was born, he was blue and silent, which made the doctors consider that the baby was dead. While his mother lay in exhaustion from the delivery of a baby who was 13 pounds at birth, his grandmother was not ready to give up just yet. Something clicked in her mind, and she took the baby immediately to the bathroom, where she held him under cold water for a while and smacked his back a couple of times. But ultimately revived the baby, and it was after that he cried for the first time. But it did not stop there. The forceps that were used to deliver Frank left a nasty scar on the left side of his face, which was permanent and became the unfortunate bane of his existence for a while. While as an adult and a star, he used makeup to cover it, but as a teenager, he was bullied by his peers for as long as he can remember. He was nicknamed the Scarface, which added on to an already depressed kid who felt alone most of the time. Why, you ask? It was because he did not have any siblings. While his parents had plans for an extended family, what happened during his delivery scared them, and the decision not to have any more kids was purely driven out of fear. To add to that, he was not a local and the son of 2 Italian immigrants, which further hardened his ability to be accepted by the kids in his surrounding areas. Being from a working-class family, his mom and dad had to work constantly to keep up with the basic necessities of the family. His father was a former boxer turned bar owner who struggled to upkeep the finances required for the family to operate smoothly. Frank's relationship with his dad was complicated. In an interview in 1965, Frank cleared out any suspicions about his childhood, as reporters at the time negatively exaggerated his living conditions. He said, "I never wanted for anything, but we did not have an abundance of anything." Whereas his dad was not physically abusive towards him, he always struggled to get his approval. So this caused another dent in Frank's identity as a kid. His mother, on the other hand, was involved in politics and was the local Democratic politician, implying that she was out of the house for a majority of the day as well. With his parents not being around, Frank was mostly left with close friends and his grandmother, who would take care of him in the absence of his parents. He showcased an early interest in music as he started working earlier than usual. So the thing is that when the Great Depression hit years later after he was born, the family began sinking further in terms of finances, and Frank had to come in and help before their ship sank. So he began singing in different corners and streets daily. It was during the same time that he aspired to become a singer. However, his parents were not too supportive right from the start. His father aimed for him to complete high school, and his mom wanted him to pursue technology as a course and get a job. So this certainly was not happening, as he was kicked out of school on account of bad behavior. The teacher said that he was not made for studies and his only ambition was for music. Not long after, his mother became extremely supportive, but not without a reason. She went to one of the streets where Frank performed at the time and looked at the crowd he gathered who was ready to pay to watch him sing. From then on, she became one of the biggest pillars of support for Frank. It is from there that Frank began his musical journey. 3. Peak music. Frank Sinatra's career began just around the period of the Great Depression in the 1930s and spanned over 6 decades. His journey as a musician, and one of the most influential figures in America, is marked by hard work, perseverance, and moments of ups and downs. Numerous awards and iconic moments seem like the cherry on the top of the cake, of which he deserves all of it himself, as he earned it. A bullied teenager who was passionate about music started singing on the streets, where crowds gathered to listen to a young boy sing. Singing on roads and in local clubs in New Jersey led him to a free performance for a local radio station. Additionally, he began taking vocal lessons from none other than John Quinlan, who was rather impressed by him, all because of the fact that he could vocalize to a B-flat top with no assistance of the microphone. One of his major events came in 1935 when he formed a band, a group called the Hokoben Four, and they won a radio contest together, which gave him immense exposure. 4 years later, on July 13, 1939, he was noticed by an industrial figure named Harry James, who was a band leader. James saw fit to hire Frank as the lead vocalist for his band, and they went ahead to record multiple songs together. One of the songs they recorded, titled All or Nothing at All, wasn't a hit when it was released. However, post-1940, when Sinatra's career picked up its pace, the song caught some attention as well and became a hit. In 1940, Sinatra teamed up with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, where his voice was accepted by the audience, and they loved it. Tommy and Frank produced more than 80 songs together, and some of the most popular ones are I'll Never Smile Again and Polka Dots and Moonbeams. Frank's vocal style captivated the audiences, and his expressive tone resonated well with them as well. Working over more than 80 songs and performing live shows with an orchestra gave Frank the necessary exposure, where he was learned and confident enough to step out of it and start his solo career. 1940s and the period after that were extremely kind to Frank, as he became a nationwide sensation where everyone just went crazy for him. His fan base increased to such a level that female fans known as the Boxers at the time used to faint watching him sing live at concerts. So additionally, it was the time of the Second World War, and some of his songs revolving around the same theme acted as a source of comfort in the tough times. Songs like You'll Never Know, Saturday Night is the Loneliest Night of the Week, and Nancy with the Laughing Face became major hits during the time. It was in 1944 that Frank stepped into acting and musical comedies as well, along with music and singing. On July 15, 1944, he began his shoot for Anchor's Awe with Gene Kelly. Fast forward to February 6, 1946, Frank won the honorary award at the Academy Awards for his work in The House I Live. In 1947, Frank worked as an ex-soldier at MG's It Happened in Brooklyn. His streak came to an abrupt halt in 1950 as he encountered multiple personal problems at once. His talks of being involved with the mafia and connections with them were prevalent in the air. He was being studied by the FBI, and this resulted in him facing backlash from the public as they started questioning his image and character. Additionally, there were mentions of him being a hot-headed character who lashed out at the most minor inconveniences, which resulted in physical assaults with the press reporters as well. While we will get to this in detail in the coming sections of the video, let's stick to his work for now. He made an explosive comeback in 1953 with his role as Angelo Maggio in From Here to Eternity. His performance earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor and marked a significant turning point in his career from here on. While the acting continued in the background, he produced some of his best work at the time. Albums like Wee Small Hours in 1955, Songs for Swingin' Lovers, 1956, and Only the Lonely, 1958, showcased his ability to create a unique blend of craft, which was something never done before. In the 1960s, he stepped down from Capitol Records and founded Reprise Records, where he was the creative head of the music to be produced. His album September of My Years in 1965 won him the Grammy Awards for Album of the Year and Best Male Vocal Performance. In 1970, he attempted to perform storytelling through his music. When this did not perform well, he decided to step back from performing for a while. In 1973, he returned with Old Blue Eyes Is Back and continued to perform through the decade. He continued to tour across the globe then as well. By that time, he was a global sensation and fans never missed one of his concerts. In 1980, he reached the status of a legend with the trilogy Past, Present, and Future. Cut to 1985, he won the Presidential Medal of Freedom and a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1986. It was in the 1990s when his health began to decline rapidly. 1995 was his final live performance, and he was well into his 70s by the time. In 1997, he won the Kennedy Center Honors Award, which added on to a legacy crafted out of gold. On May 14, 1998, the world lost its most sensational icon, which was the result of a heart attack. From then on, he has lived in people's minds and hearts forever. 4. A hothead. Sinatra is a unique man, utterly without hypocrisy. It's unusual for most people and almost frightening to some to be faced with honesty. This was Sinatra's friend Gary's opinion of him. Sinatra's quarrels with his wife back then Ava Gardner were as out in the public as they could be, and the couple had a rather notorious reputation for squabbling more often. What people think about it and how was it portrayed by the journalists is a different concept altogether. But this Ava Gardner had something different to say about any arguments that they had. Her perspective was that they both were individuals who had extreme passion in their field, so as much as they quarreled, she thought that it was for the best that they did. No matter what she says, it cannot be denied that it was a rather toxic relationship between the two, and as per an insider, Frank and Ava had several episodes of outbursts which involved a whole lot of screaming and pointing fingers at each other, counting each other's faults. We would be sitting in the living room and hear them upstairs in the bedroom quarreling and arguing. Ava would scream at Frank and he would slam the door and storm downstairs. Minutes later, we'd smell a very sweet fragrance. Ava decided that she wasn't mad anymore, and so she sprayed the stairwell with her perfume. Frank would smell it and race back up to the bedroom. Then, it would be hours before he'd come back down. As weird as it might sound, it happened. But it was not just on a personal note that Frank's anger got the better of him. There have been numerous public encounters where Frank had fierce outbursts and ended up in a physical tussle which could either be with reporters or people in the team. A die-hard fan or his close associates and best friends would be aware of the fact that Frank valued his privacy and dignity to such an extent that he was fueled with rage if anyone tried to intervene in matters which are personal to him. But if Hollywood reporters have earned a reputation for something, it is exactly for invading privacy and getting juicy content out of superstars. But Frank was not ready to be a part of it anytime soon. No way, hose. In 1947, a reporter questioned Frank Sinatra on his relationship with Gardner, which resulted in a physical fizzle between the two. Another famous incident was in 1957 when Frank Sinatra was in Cuba for a trip. and one of the reporters snapped him having a conversation with a potential mobster named Lucky Luciano. So this added to the legend's image that he was not afraid to use physical force in an attempt to safeguard his privacy. Additionally, Sinatra had a couple of outbursts that were involved with his team as well. The main point is that Sinatra was the best in his field, but it did not come easy. There were the highest standards that had to be met by the team and himself, resulting in immense pressure whenever it was a live performance or a recording session. During one of his performances in Las Vegas, a sound engineer had to face the heat of Sinatra's anger when the equipment had some issues resulting in hiccups in between the performance. Sinatra lost his cool and threw a microphone at him as a result of his anger. In a 1965 interview, Frank was questioned about his boiling point by Walter Cronkite, to which Frank's response was, "Not anymore, it used to be." I think that comes with a normal growing up and the way of living with people with whom you have become acquainted. He additionally clarified things about back in the day when his boiling point was low. He said, "When I say I had a low boiling point, it doesn't mean I went around kicking dogs and old ladies." From what we have understood, it is safe to conclude the fact that Sinatra was a hothead, but not without pure reason. While anger as an emotion is justified and completely normal, considering the amount of pressure he had on himself and from his surroundings when all he tried to do was be the best, some of his actions might not be justifiable after all. That was us. But what do you think about Sinatra having a low boiling point? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. 5. Connections. Confusion, counter-opinions, and cross-questioning are a part of Hollywood, which might be as ugly as it gets but cannot be sidelined. Similar was the case with Frank Sinatra and his alleged connection to mobsters and underworld godfather Willie Moretti back in 1940. If you have kept up with the video so far, you are aware that Sinatra rose to fame and success in 1940 and the decade that spanned afterward. Multiple shows, fans drooling over his live performances, and a world tour of a rising star is what the world saw. But we know that you are interested in what goes behind the curtain, aren't you? Well, let's have a look at it then. Before we give any further information, here is what Frank himself had to say about the connections with mobsters. He said, "Then came the ridiculous accusations and statements that I was consulting with mobsters and gangsters. And that added fire to it after a while, and I just kept presenting it at all times, but I just couldn't stop it. There was no way to stop it." But the FBI director back then, John Edgar Hoover, has something else to say about it. It was since 1940 that Frank was on the FBI's record where he was being monitored. The sole intention of the FBI at the time was to find any link that could circle back to Frank and the mob being connected. Frank has a couple of people to blame for this rather unwanted investigation into his personal life, which would be the reporters who followed him like a tail and the comedian and one of his close friends, Don Rickles. Frank had a reputation for being a hot-headed personality, as discussed in the previous section of the video. While intervention in his personal life was something that he did not tolerate at all, any jokes or insults directed towards him were a big no-no for him as well. Rickles often joked around in his shows about Frank, which were mostly targeted at his anger in connection with the mob. Rickles said, "Make yourself at home, Frank. Hit somebody." Everyone around me didn't believe that I had the macaroons to say this to him. In 1942, Sinatra was involved with Tommy Dorsey as they worked together, and problems erupted when Frank wanted to go solo and leave him. So that was probably the first time that Frank got involved with the New Jersey godfather Willie Moretti, who put Dorsey in his place that allowed Frank to pursue a solo career. The jokes made by Rickles in his comedy shows added to an alleged suspicion of Frank being involved with the underworld. Frank has always been clear from his end that he wasn't linked to any criminal activity. Sam Giancana was another reputed mobster who was associated with Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. That was a place where Frank used to perform regularly, and he used to join his shows as well. So rumors were that Frank was the one who introduced Giancana and John F. Kennedy just before the elections in order to secure labor union support for the same. In 1962, the FBI took a step further and tapped his conversations and phone calls, along with following him anywhere he went. However, this was also fruitless as they weren't able to link him directly to the mobsters or any criminal activity. Over the 1960s, Frank's alleged connection to main gang bosses only grew, and these were some of the names that came forward. Lucky Luciano, Bugsy Siegel, and Carlo Gambino, who lead some of the most organized crime groups at the time. Moreover, he was spotted delivering a bag full of cash in Havana, Cuba, to Luciano. This was around 1946, when Frank attended the Mafia Havana conference. It is believed that Charles Lucky Luciano arranged the meeting, and some of the mobsters went along, with Frank acting as his bodyguards. When questioned later by the FBI, Frank responded that he wasn't aware of where he was being taken to at the time, which made people question the reality even more. To this day, the FBI has a 2,000-page detailed report on Frank Sinatra and his connection to the mobsters, which consists of phone and call records and secret meetings and exchanges that happen. And while all that is there is still not a direct yes or no answer to the question of whether Frank was connected to the mobs or not. 6. A legacy. Frank Sinatra, as an American idol, respected and loved for his craft and what he gave to America in terms of a strong foundation and a new look to the American pop culture, left behind a legacy. He positively impacted so many lives through his work, mostly his songs and lyrics. The albums he often released were full of emotion, and his live performances as well had a profound impact on the audience. It's often said that music has the power to change the emotions of a person if done right. That is exactly what Frank did through his work. When people listen to your music and it uplifts them, your work as an artist is done, and you can't be more grateful for it. Apart from a cultural impact, he changed people's whole outlook on music. He often brought in complex compositions that were given a touch of love and care with meaningful lyrics, which went on to become timeless classics that are remembered to this day. Apart from being one of the greatest musicians the world has ever seen, Frank was an excellent father who deeply cared about his kids. Her first daughter, Nancy Sandra Sinatra, said in an interview, "I used to cry when I heard his voice on the radio because he wasn't there. He was coming from this box. So my dad was always there. Even though he wasn't living in our house, he was always on the phone. Always just a car ride away." Francis Wayne Sinatra Jr. worked with his dad in one of the albums in which he sang My Kind of Town. Frank Sinatra was excited to work with his son, and he considered the amount of experience that his son had in the business in 1995. It was just during Sinatra's last live performance that they performed together. Christina Sinatra recalls some amazing time she spent with her dad. She said, "We made many trips to Europe together, Dad and I, and New York. He showed me Hoboken for the first time. He walked me down Times Square for the first time when I was about 17. All said and done, he left an energy stamp so strong that it will be remembered for generations to come. That was all from our side." Are you a big fan of Frank Sinatra? Which information about him from this video surprised you the most? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Feel free to drop a like on this video and share it with your friends and family. If you liked what you saw, do not forget to click that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so that you do not miss an update from our channel.